Have you ever thought about getting your DNA tested to find out where your people are from? I'm not talking about what city down south your family migrated from, but where your roots first began to grow. Today we're talking birthright journeys for Black people and one man's journey back to Africa as he reconnects with his heritage. Check out our conversation. All right. Thank you for joining another episode of UNGENTRIFIED. Of course, it's your boy, Ken Johnson. And I feel like it's been forever, and it kind of has, but I've been busy, but I'm back. And I have a really dope topic and a really dope friend of mine who's on to discuss it with me. But before we get into that, one thing that I ask everybody that comes on the show is what's on their radar at the moment. So, whatever's hot to you, what's your favorite thing right now? What book are you reading? What Netflix binge have you been rolling down? What's your favorite food? What's your favorite jam? What's on your radar right now?
There's two things right now. My favorite song that gets me motivated every morning is Cardi B Money. And you would think I'm a stripper or something like that, but it has nothing to do with that. But that song just gets me focused when some mornings you wake up and you're just unmotivated. That song puts me in the right place. Like, nah, bro, it's time to get up and get this money. So I would say that. And then on a completely different spectrum, but maybe related, the book, Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, the creator of Nike. So I love reading books that are about, entrepreneurs and those that are really sharing their failures more than their successes, because everybody on that entrepreneurship journey knows how difficult it can be. So that book is dope, and I'm really into that right now.
Cool. I just got back maybe a week or so ago from being on the continent for about 6 weeks. And
I saw you living. I saw you out there living.
I was trying to be like you. But I spent the chunk of that time in one of my favorite places. Everybody knows South Africa. And of course, anytime I go there, I'm Shazamming mad hard, trying to catch as much music as I possibly can. And I remember being in Durban, and I opened up my hotel window, and somebody was riding down the street bumping this song, and I thought it was bananas. I couldn't get my phone quick enough and put it out the window. But I found out it's this Zulu artist named Simmy, and the song was dope. I heard it. I was like, oh, all right, I'm going to download it when I get back. I go back to Joburg, and I'm in an Uber, and I hear another song. I'm like, oh, that's dope. Shazam it, it's her again. So I'm like, okay, she's 2 for 2. I don't know this chick. She's 2 for 2. I go and find out her album just dropped. The album is bananas. Now, it's all in Zulu, in isiZulu to be specific. I think except for like 4 words. The whole thing is in isiZulu. But I've been rocking it since I started listening to it in December, like nonstop. I was playing it earlier today. So, Simmy, her album is Tugela Ferry, and it's dope. So that's been what's on my radar at the moment. I just finished watching Russian Doll on Netflix, and I don't know if it was my favorite thing, but I watched the whole thing. It was cool for what it was, but I just kept seeing reviews and people talking about how good the show was, and it was all right. Do you remember the movie Groundhog Day?
Yeah.
So it's kind of in that same vein. This girl keeps waking up in the same day and trying to figure out why she keeps dying at the end of it. But
gotcha.
Yeah.
Speaking of Netflix binges, not really a binge, but it was just, oh man, it took me so long to get through it because I just kept screaming at the TV. I don't know if you've seen, just really drew a blank on the name of it.
Not Lost in Plain Sight, because everybody's been going crazy about
Lost in Plain Sight. You knew exactly what I was talking about.
Yeah, it's next on my list. No, it's next on my list.
Let me tell you something. It's only an hour and change, I think, but dedicate 3 hours to it because I guarantee you're going to have to pause it so many times just by being so confused and dumbfounded and just livid at the stupidity of people. And there's just some jaw dropping, shocking moments in that joint. Dedicate 3 hours to it, but it is completely worth the watch. And for me, I mean, especially right after watching, the R. Kelly documentary series, the thing that I'm picking up most on these situations, and not to give too much away on it, but the thing that I'm picking up most is that there's some people out here who are master manipulators, and those people know how to find the cracks in people's character and use that to their advantage to get any and everything that they want. And that's some of the craziest stuff I've seen, and that's what I'm taking from it. So everybody check that joint out if you haven't yet. Not even on some like protect your child, which you should be doing anyway, but just on some like learning the psychology of people. I think that's the biggest thing I'm taking away from it. It is nuts.
Yeah, I heard that it's bananas. Like I said, it's next on my watch list. So okay, all right, I'm definitely gonna be pressing play sometime in the next day or so. This is my first time being home with no destination in the next couple of days since like November. So I'm home for 2 weeks and I've been posted up in the house. I'm not trying to go nowhere. I've been Uber Eats and everything, Amazon Prime and everything, like just enjoying the four walls of my home. So it's been catching up on TV.
And doesn't it feels good because sometimes people don't realize, like, when you travel so much and travel for a living, those days home, man, they feel like everything.
Everything. Yo, before I left in December, I had ordered some memory foam pillows. This is so wasted and washed and old, but I ordered some memory foam pillows that my mom recommended to me when I was in Thanksgiving, and I got them like 2 days before I left. I was fiending for them pillows the whole 6 weeks I was gone. I couldn't wait to get back in this piece and lay up. And they've been my best friends ever since. But shout out to the inventors of memory foam. You guys did some major work for the human race. But let's stop talking about pillows and binge watching and let's get into why I brought you on the show. Before we even do that, let's get into who you are. So you guys are probably wondering who I've been talking to for the last couple of moments. So go ahead and tell the people who you are.
What's up, y'all? It's Rondel Holder, CEO and creator of Soul Society 101.
He's being mad humble. That's just one of his many
That's a
job
fact.
titles.
I am a serial entrepreneur, but we can leave it to that for right now. I don't want to, I don't want to over-inundate people with inundate. Sorry, why can't I speak? I don't want to inundate people with all of the many companies that I'm and hustles that I have going on.
Well, he's not going to, but I'll give you one of his.
Go for it, man.
Titles.
Go for it.
One of his titles, his recent titles, is documentarian, and that's part of the reason why I brought him on the show. Rondel took this major journey not too long ago, and it started with a swab of the mouth. Or did you do blood? No, I'm just playing. I think it was a swab of the mouth or some spit. But
a little bit of spit, yeah.
Yeah. You took a heritage journey. You took a journey that was based off of results from DNA tests. Is that right?
Yes, man. So I took a DNA test and found out my lineage, which I was always curious about. So super excited. I put that documentary out a few weeks ago. It's been getting great feedback. It's called Heritage Journey. You can look that up on YouTube and it'll pop right up. But yeah, super excited about it, man.
Yes, and you definitely want to check it out. It's 2 parts, about 15 minutes of your time, but 15 minutes well spent. But yeah, let's go back to the beginning before you started spitting into test tubes. So what sparked the curiosity for wanting to dig back into, where you came from?
Yeah, I think for me, I've always been curious about it. Obviously being African American, most of us at least, don't have that clear knowledge and connection to where where our families are from beyond the United States. For me, I have a little bit more information because my family's from the Caribbean, but the history of Africa is so much longer than that of the Caribbean and Black people in the United States. So I've always wanted to know that history to really elongate the lineage that I come from and get the full sense of who I am and who my people are. So it's always been on my radar, and, thankful for DNA testing to really paint a clearer picture for me.
Right. And like you said, you are lucky. You had at least another destination outside of this country that we're in right now to look to. Like you said, your family is from, or your mom's side, that's from Grenada?
Yeah, my mother's from Grenada and my father's from Jamaica, and I don't take it for granted having a home outside of the U.S. because I completely understand the need for refuge and just a place that you can feel connected to outside of the U.S. being a Black person in America, because we all know it can be hard sometimes, so hard sometimes. And, we'll get to that in a little bit, but outside of the Caribbean, my travels to Africa have sort of given me some homes away from home as well, which I do not take for granted at all.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I've been lucky enough to go to 3 countries in Africa now, Senegal, Ghana, and South Africa. And they all give me different feelings, but they all feel like home at the same time.
Absolutely. And I think for me, and you were talking about South Africa earlier, it's still my favorite place. South Africa is just, I just can't even explain the feeling that I get when I'm there, but I literally feel like I'm home, and I could live there. I could live in Joburg or Durban, or both. And, it just feels like home. And I just hope everyone has the opportunity to experience that at least once in their lives. The feeling of being in Africa, because it's something definitely deeper than the physical.
Yeah. And I'm not one to get jealous, but as I've made more friends throughout the continent, I do get a little jealous of the fact that they can easily identify, like, hey, my people are from here. They're from this village. They're of this tribe. Sometimes all the way down to like, oh, we can go there right now if you want to.
Exactly.
And,
exactly.
For a lot of stateside, it's, oh, yeah, my family from East Baltimore. And that's like where it stops, my family from uptown, and that's it. And some people don't want to know much more, but there are a lot of us who, I think, at a certain point, start to have that yearning to figure out why I am me and who I am. Yeah, and it, the continent is big, it's massive, but I think the moment you step foot anywhere on the continent, you automatically start feeling that longing for finding out, who your people are. But did you have any concerns about spitting in that cup, like sending your DNA off to a company? How was that for you?
It's interesting because for me, I don't know why I didn't have any fear about doing it. I mean, I've read articles and I've heard some things about certain companies, sharing your information, or at least the idea of that, or I think the most extreme version of that is cloning, or, submitting to the FBI or different things like that. For some reason, I don't have a fear of it. I don't know why. I just did it, sent it in. I was like, it is what it is. Life is, that's kind of my nature in life. I'm one of those kind of like calculated risk people. Like, yeah, something could happen, but I'm not going to stay inside all day because something could happen anywhere in the world. Right. So I'm just kind of like, this is information I've always wanted to know. It's a damn shame. I saw people talking about this on social media. Like, it's so funny that white people took us from Africa, disconnected us from this history, forcefully disconnected us from this history. And here they are charging us to get that information back again. And it is crazy. But there are companies like African Ancestry, that's Black owned. So at least you're giving your dollar back to Black people. But, in general, I think whether it's, a white owned company or a Black owned company, I'm grateful for the opportunity to get that information, regardless of how it was taken from me. It is empowering to have it back. So investing, somewhere between $60 and $300, depending on which test you take, is a small price to pay for the information that you get and what that does to your character.
Right. And shout out to African Ancestry. They just sent me a kit, and that kit is like $300.
I know. I need to, I took, the test I took was Ancestry DNA, but I also want to, take the African ancestry test, because they go Ancestry DNA gives you a list of countries that your ancestors are from, and
Hmm.
African ancestry goes as deep as the tribe that most of your lineage links to. So I want to take that one as well.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. They sent myself and my co-founder of Black and Abroad, Eric. We both got tests, so we're gonna take them and get the results back in a couple of weeks. Which I'm hoping I get it before I go back to the continent, which I'm set to do at the end of March.
Oh
So
man,
yeah.
let me cut you off real quick, because the way you be traveling, bro. I mean, I travel a lot, but I'm pissed that we have not been in Africa living our best lives together. So I'm putting it out there on your podcast that you need to stop fronting, and we need to link up in South Africa or Ghana or somewhere, bro. Like we gotta be out there living, bro.
Yeah, look, bro, with me. I'm about to be on the continent heavy this year. It's been
Same,
my
same.
focus super hard. I want to turn that 3 into 6 and that 6 into 12 and so forth. So yeah, I'm trying to be all up in the motherland. I'm trying to keep that vibration going and keep that frequency out there so that it keeps pulling me there. It does become a magnet, and you keep wanting to go back and explore more and get, more of the nuance of all of the different countries. So yeah,
Yeah,
I'm all about it.
that's one of the things I think, just to talk about really quickly, is that, and it's not all the way our fault as Americans, but for some reason I think people lump Africa into one place, but there are 54 countries, out of which I've been to 9 so far, I think, thankfully. And honestly, they all have their own culture, vibe, energy, experiences, food, aesthetic, fashion sense, music. Being in South Africa, they're big on what they call Afro house, which is, African language over house music beats.
Hmm.
But in West Africa, especially Nigeria and Ghana, pumping out Afro beats music, which I'm super hip to right now. So it's just a different experience, and not to overwhelm people, but just to provide a little bit of insight. That is different. West Africa, South Africa are totally different regions. And then even within West Africa, I went from Togo and Benin for the Heritage Journey documentary, and you could literally see and feel the distinct difference as soon as you cross the border. So
Right, and
it's
they're
dope,
only but
man.
a couple of hours apart from one another.
Yeah,
They like sit right
absolutely.
next to each other. Yeah, yeah. It's a trip to me, and like I said, the more I start to hang out, the more I see the differences. And I be telling people, you missing out on all this blackness. You have no
What?
idea all these
This shit.
different types of black.
And
And
that's what I love. It's just like, going back to South Africa, one of the things I love about it is that, it has a very parallel history to the United States. So a lot of the things that you do in the US, you can do there. Like you can brunch and day party and all that. But it's like, yo, I'm with all these black people though. Like no matter where I go in Joburg, I'm surrounded by black people. So that is a fundamental difference of the experience there that I love. It's like, oh, I could live this parallel life, but in Africa, like how dope is that?
right, yeah. Yeah, no, it's something I try to push everybody to do, and I hope that everybody does at some point in their life. That's one of my contributions to our community over here, is getting as many folks over there as I possibly can. But look, since we're talking about folks and our cousins over here and whatnot, did anybody try to discourage you from doing the test? Because, and like you said, all these articles coming out about, somebody did the test and then their cousin got locked up for some old charge from 15 years ago. Did
No,
anybody try to press you back on it?
no, actually, I didn't tell many people before I took the test. So that's probably partially why I didn't get a lot of pushback, but I didn't, nobody really gave me pushback. Of course, there are people who give you those warnings, but I kind of feel like those are the same people who, when I say I'm going to a country in Africa, it's like, oh, how is it over there? I heard it's X, Y, and Z. I feel like those are the same types of people. So again, going back to who I am as a person, I'm not one of those people who I take it with a grain of salt, man. Anything can happen anywhere in the world. And I'm just kind of like, I'm taking this test. I'm doing it. So even if I had pushback from people, it didn't sink in. I was just kind of like, I'm doing it.
Yeah. All right. So you spit in the tube and mailed it off, put it in an envelope, mailed it off. How long did it take for you to get your results back?
I got a rush order. So I think I got it back in like 3 weeks, but with Ancestry DNA, at least at that time, I think the standard time is around 8 weeks.
Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, so I didn't know you could rush it. I thought it was just like, well, of course you can. This is America. You can rush everything. You can Amazon Prime everything. So,
yeah.
So
and I was on a deadline to shoot the documentary. So we had to contact them and let them know, like, we're trying to get these results so we can book this trip and head out.
Gotcha. So break down your results for us. And were they what you expected?
So before I break it down, going to was it what I expected? Not really. So I had an idea, and this is for everybody. Well, most people, I should say, the Black African diaspora in the U.S. and the Caribbean, that it was going to be mostly from West Africa. Mm-hmm. But my grandmother on my maternal side always told us that, oh, we're from Senegal. So I always had in my head, like, okay, when I actually do get to find out, it's going to be this huge Senegalese percentage. My Senegalese was 1%, Ken.
Oh, wow.
It was 1%.
Was it 1% or like the less than 1% sign next to it? Because, you know, like when they just start throwing numbers in at someone, like, all right, you might be from here too.
Exactly. The terminology they used next to it was, we're not confident that you have a lot of lineage in this region. But going to the list of the countries that did have a strong percentage. So I was 29% from Togo and Benin, which was where I went for the first 2 parts of my Heritage Journey documentary. 24% from Ghana and Ivory Coast, so Cote d'Ivoire. So those are the next 2 countries that I'm going to. I'm planning to head out there in either March or April to continue, connecting with my ancestral ties. And then it was 17% from Congo, Cameroon, and Southern Bantu peoples, 11% from Mali, and then on the European side, there was about 12% from the UK and Wales, I think like 3% from Ireland or something like that. And then I didn't really pay attention to the European side because I didn't care that much, but to be 100% honest. Right. But yeah, that's the majority of my breakdown.
And, it's funny. Whenever I would see people share their results online, you always see Congo and Cameroon on there in some like value. It's always on there. And it's like, are they just throwing that up there to give something to folks? But
you know what it is? I think there's some, and I'm still learning, like I'm not the historian on this, but there was some movement, and I think some key ports. First of all, so Ghana had a very huge port.
Right.
Benin had a very huge port where they were gathering people from the neighboring countries. Mm-hmm. So I believe there's another really, really big port in either Congo or Cameroon. And so when they brought the slaves over to the Caribbean and the U.S. and parts of South America, it's a mixture, which is, again, when I was going back to the pros and cons of the different tests, the thing that I do like about the Ancestry DNA test is that it gives you the breakdown, because they might have taken a man from Benin and then a woman from Congo and Cameroon. They had a baby. That child, had a baby with someone from Ghana and Senegal. So most of us really are a mixture of a lot of different countries. And that just, again, is a matter of the ports that we were taken from and then where they were dropped off on the transatlantic slave route. So it's really interesting to learn more about it and the, I guess the mechanics behind what was a crazy machine of Black slavery in the Americas.
Right. Yeah. And that's something, maybe that's where that 1% for Senegal comes from. Cause there's definitely, there was a slave port there. Gorée Island was one of the major ports. And then you have, Cape Coast and, well, Ghana was full of them, but Cape Coast and Elmina are 2. And then, like you said, in Benin as well. So It's like, let's just cover all the bases. We're going to put them all on there because his people might have rolled through one of these. But yeah, I guess at that point, they know enough of maybe where you originate from, but they got to throw it all up there because you may have left from one of those for, so once you found out, your genetic background, how'd you go about planning the trip? It sounded like it was a pretty close window between discovery and departure.
Yeah, super close. So I partnered with this platform called The Points Guy, who
Hmm.
focuses on travel rewards points and things like that. And I was grateful for the opportunity to partner with them on this documentary, because they have a large platform of travelers, and they, they were behind this whole DNA travel, as they called it. And so I think I took the test in September, October, and I got the results back, like I said, in a few weeks, and then planned it quickly to get out there, in October so that, we could shoot the content, edit it, and get it out before the new year. So I released it right at the end of 2018. But the interesting part, so a few things. Togo and Benin are Francophone countries. So they were owned by the French. And so they're French speaking African countries. I know zero French. So that was, that was trial number one in mapping out, the trip to Togo and Benin. Also the tourism boards there are not super well-oiled machines. Like South Africa has an amazing tourism board that, and I've worked with them also, and Ghana has an amazing tourism board, but Togo and Benin being smaller countries, didn't. So there weren't like an abundance of tourists to choose from either. So those are some of the trials to sort of navigating those two countries. But um, I would do it all over again because the experience there, I think, is so unique to anywhere else in the world. And, just figuring it out on the fly. Like I'm the type of person, I'm not anal, like I have an itinerary from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m., but I like to have a rough idea of what I'm going to do when I go to a country. And
Hmm.
on this trip, I had to kind of leave it up to faith. Like, okay, I've been looking online for months and I cannot find proper information on Togo and Benin. I'm going to use social media, the tool of social media, through my platform, Social Society 101, and other platforms to connect with people to see if I can get in contact with some people that live there and they can kind of help me navigate the space. And that's truly what helps. So platforms like Black and Abroad, when they post a photo from Benin and you're going to Benin, feel free to reach out to those people. That's what I did. You know what I'm saying? And it
Yeah.
really gives you a different approach to your travel experience because talking to people who've been firsthand, you're going to get, okay, go to this spot. It's dope. Make sure you check this out. Stay away from here. It's a tourist trap. That type of information. And that made the trip what it was.
Yeah. That, like I do it all the time. If I know I'm about to go somewhere and I can't get some clear information or the information that I find online isn't centered around the experience I'm trying to have,
Right.
uh, shout out to Yelp and their Lily White reviews of
Yelp,
locations
look,
and TripAdvisor too.
Yelp is the low-key reason why Soul Society 101 and Black and Abroad exists, if we're all
Exactly.
honest, because, we looked at those platforms before we started ours, and clearly the reviews and their perspectives were not ours. So, they showed a very one-sided perspective of the world and venues and destinations, but, we created our own, and that's why we get to do what we do, man.
Right, right. And there was a point that was made in part one of your documentary, and I believe the girl's name was Chris, while you were in Togo. And this her quote sat with me for the rest of the day after I watched the video. But she said, there are people in the world who hate Africa and love Africa in the same heart, like at the
Yes.
same time. And I was like,
Yes.
yo, if you ain't preaching right now, Chris,
No,
like,
honestly, especially in the day that we are in right now, where we have so many fake woke people and so many people who are riding the wave of Wakanda and Afrobeats is hot. So now I'm like fake into African culture. But when it really gets down to it, or the idea of traveling there, or the idea of connecting with people, it's a totally different experience. So it's complicated and it's layered. So I try not to blame people for the way they are with their relationship to Africa because it's something that, again, has been purposely dismantled. But we have to consciously think to ourselves, why do I have these thoughts that I have, or this fear that I have, or this misconception that I have? And it's because of what we've been fed and told and forced to believe. So that statement, when she said it, I was just like, no, I know so many people like that who love the idea of Africa on one hand, but hate it all at the same time.
Right. And this is inside the house. This is with our own family, our
Facts.
collective
Facts.
diasporic family. Like there are some people who have completely, you know, just false or outdated ideas of what's going on in that continent. And yeah, I was floored when she said it, and it reminded me of another quote that I had saw not too long ago, where it was like everybody wants the rhythm, but nobody wants the blues. And
Wow. There you go.
yeah, and I was just like, whoa, it made so much sense. But yeah, I have this conversation frustratingly with some of the folks in our community where they're like, why there, or or why are you going back,
Right.
yeah, or they
But that my thing is, why not? Because if someone says that they're going to London for the fifth time, you don't question it. When someone says they're going to Italy or even Thailand for the fifth time, you don't question it. So why is it that you question me when I say I'm going back to a country in Africa? And the
right,
thing is, again, you have to question yourself. You have to question your own motives and thoughts of, why is this an issue? Why am I questioning this person? It is a destination like anywhere else in the world, and one that we should be more inclined to go to. So,
right. And I think once people realize that the ties that bind us are closer than they think, they would be more open to it. And I've recently learned I picked this up from my homegirl when I was in Ghana. She's from the South here, but she is an ethnomusicology doctor. So she's an ethnomusicologist, which is the
break that
study.
down, because I'm like,
Yeah, it's a mouthful. Ethnomusicologist, which is someone who studies like the history of music. And being a Black woman, she has centered her studies and her dissertation around Black music.
hmm
So I did an episode with her. If you want to check that out, it's 33 and 90s R&B, where we talk about why people in our age group have a love and an affection for 90s music and the science behind it. But she and
oh,
I were,
I definitely have to check that out, because
yeah,
90s music is my absolute favorite.
right. It reminds me, but yeah, there's a whole science as to why we have such an attachment to it, our age
Okay.
group. But she and I crossed paths when we were both in Ghana at the top of the year, and she introduced to me something that they utilize a lot in ethnomusicology, which is the idea of deep culture. So
Mm.
there's two types of culture that we deal with: surface culture, which is kind of like the things that are, well, just by namesake, on the surface. So things that would be an example of that for a culture would be like food, clothing, music, dialects, history. Like that's all surface culture when we're talking about a group of people. But when you go forward into deep culture, this refers to the norms that are unseen about a people. They're not tangible or obvious. It's more about, ideas, feelings, attitudes within a certain culture or a country. So an example of deep culture would be like attitudes towards elders, or, like levels of authority, the concepts around marriage and family dynamics, structures around time and power, and like nonverbal communications and gestures. Like
Right.
those kinds of things are your deep culture, things that you just do and don't even think twice about it. And it's a lot of things that I feel, and I've always told people, like, no matter where I am within the diaspora, I always know how to act when I walk into somebody's grandma's house. Like, it's
That's a fact.
Jamaican, South African, Ghanaian,
Yep.
Senegalese. I know what to do when
Yep.
I roll up in the elder mother's house. I just know. You fall in line.
Because let you come in and not greet everyone in the room, especially her. Let you try it.
Right, right. I know what fussing out is in every language. I can pick up on that tone real quick. So when you were on this trip, when you were in Benin or Togo, did you have any of those aha moments where, like, things that are innate to us as a people, like those deep culture moments? Did any of that happen for you?
Man, so many times. I didn't know the term for it, and I briefly touch on it in the documentary. Just the ties that I saw between, Benin and Togo, and Black culture in the U.S. and Black culture in the Caribbean, but so much of it from the way people carry themselves. There's a certain walk, a certain swag to the walk that I'm like, man, this all originated here. When you see people and how they move and how they interact with one another and how they congregate and, how the looks that people give. Because another thing about Black people is that we have a whole language without saying a word. So the
Mm-hmm.
looks are universal, man. When somebody's mad or when you say something out of pocket and somebody gives you that side eye look, that's universal amongst Black people, man. That is a universal look. So I was picking up on all those things in my experience in Africa, and it was just it's all of that stuff that going back to what I was saying before, making you feel whole and understanding your character on a deeper level because it didn't. The history of Black people in America is limited, and we have an amazing history here, but our history on the continent of Africa goes so much further, and it is our history. So it's important for us to know it and connect to it.
Yeah. Yeah. When speaking to my homegirl, Federa, she said that Ghana specifically immediately reminded her of like the Deep South. And it makes so much sense because if that's where our people were leaving from,
Right.
and heading here, those traditions aren't going to get lost on a boat. Those are things that, especially if it's, something that we would identify as deep culture, those things would remain very much true. She also said it felt like an HBCU to her. So if you've ever been to HBCU and you know what that spirit feels like,
Right.
she said getting things done in Ghana felt like trying to get things done at the administration of an HBCU.
Woo!
So I know that feeling all too well. Shout out to Morgan State for my undergrad experience. So it immediately clicked when she said that. But, it's funny for me, as I've traveled around the continent, the concept of time.
I was literally about to say it, bro. I was literally about to say the concept of time is probably the most universal Black trait that it's like this. It's a mystery to me how. It shouldn't be a mystery, right? I guess it all originated there in Africa, but no matter where you go, it's like if you go to a Black restaurant, for example, and you put in the order, you know, kick up your feet because you're gonna be there for a while. You're gonna be there for a while.
Yeah.
Just get comfortable.
And somebody broke it down for me. They were like, back in the day of days when it was us villages and tribes, there was no concept of time. It was morning and night. So, if a meeting was supposed to happen, it was like, when the sun rises, we're going to meet and discuss, whatever's going on, or when the sun sets, we're going to do these things. So we had very loose standards and concepts of time. Hours and minutes was something that was a very European concept.
Mm-hmm.
So for us, it's always been a very open space for interpretation.
Time is very fluid for Black people. Very fluid concept.
Yeah. So, the idea of birthright travel is something that hasn't really been connected to us as a people. You see it happen with Jewish people, people, they send their children home and have that pilgrimage home so that they get, a full idea of who they are as an individual and as a collective group. But now with, these DNA tests, we have something similar to a birthright opportunity for us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do you see this as an opportunity to have kind of that full circle moment that people are missing out on?
Absolutely. I think, that's exactly how I looked at it. And in my Heritage Journey documentary, that's how I closed out, the second part in Benin was that I wish that we Black people would make it a requirement the same way that other groups and, they take a trip back to their Mecca or their homeland and it's a fundamental part of their, coming of age. I think it's important for us to do the same because again, especially for us where most of us, have been disconnected from that history and actually have to dig to learn, we aren't taught our history and our culture in school. We're taught a very limited view of who we are. They start with slavery as if that's where it all started for Black people in the world. But
Mm-hmm.
we're not learning from, school about the kings and queens of these empires in Africa that, led some of the things that we know of modern day technology and science. We're not learning about the great warriors and tribes that paved the way for so much of what is present day Africa. And for that matter, if you're going to look at us, Black people in America, as a connection to that, what is popular culture in America today? So, there's so much that I think unfortunately, we have to get there to learn, but you can also look at that as an opportunity to, again, complete yourself and give yourself a holistic view of who you are, by taking that trip. So and I know for some people, money is the issue, because I often pose the question to people when they ask, oh, why do you go to Africa so much? You love Africa. What is it about it? I ask, why haven't you been here? Especially for people who travel often, Black people who travel often. What has stopped you from traveling to Africa? If it's money, I can understand that. But at the same time, if you travel to other places, it's not really an excuse, because I've never been to Africa for more than $700 round trip on a flight.
Right.
And I've been to now 9 countries. So if you're going to, and if it's time, like the flight, I hate long flights. If you're going to Bali and Thailand and
17
China,
hours.
it's the same thing. So again, I think a lot of people make excuses for why they can't, or why it's going to be in 3 years instead of, next year. But, and again, there are real situations, and I know that travel, is something that you have to put in perspective with your overall budget. But if you are spending money on other things like popping bottles and buying clothes, which I'm not judging you for, because everybody has their own thing, then you can't afford this. And if you are taking these long trips to other places in the world, then you can sit your butt on a flight to South Africa and Ghana. The flights might even be shorter. You know what I'm saying? Again, it's just the idea of Africa just feels so out of reach for so many people. And I think that's the issue. And I think connecting it back to, a birthright experience, you're damn right. I think every Black person should make that trip. And I guarantee you, once you go once, you're going to want to go again.
Absolutely. And let me give a little quick geography lesson. So Senegal has the point of land that is closest to the United States. That's why one of the major slave ports was there. Flights direct from New York to Senegal, 7 hours. So, I think New York to Paris is like 6 and some change. So It's not that much of a difference to
talk about it. Put them on blast, man. Put them on blast and let them
know. And look, we can do an accounting lesson too. Let's do some finances. So as I mentioned, I was in the continent in December and came back in January. So I flew to Senegal first. And I got a flight from New York to Senegal. It was $600. Then I flew from Senegal to South Africa. That flight was $420. Now, mind you, that was a flight I took on Christmas Eve. So this is high season, $424.
Right.
When it came time for me to go from South Africa to Ghana, I paid $320 for that one way. And then when I came back, Ghana to the States, $500. So, those are prices that people pay to go from, DC to LA.
All the time.
It's comparable
to Miami. New York is going to Miami. Y'all be dropping so much money. And on top of that, really quickly, I just want to add, oftentimes the currency exchange rate is in your favor. So South Africa, where the rand is typically like 12 to 1 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You're having a full meal and drinks, and you might be dropping $5-6 US. Sometimes I'm in an Uber in Johannesburg, and I feel like I'm riding out for like 45 minutes to an hour, and then I get the bill to my account, and it's like $6 US. So that's the other thing. Like, you may be going to some places domestically or in the Caribbean or in Europe and spending way more than you would ever spend in these countries for the same experience.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Once you get there, I always tell people about South Africa. I've been there where the Ram was 15-1. So I was really in there like raining Mandelas everywhere. You know,
Living your best.
right. So yeah, once you get there, the money you spent on a flight will be recouped, and you know the lack of money that you're spending on food, hotel, and the like. So
Right.
there's definitely space for having a full trip for the same or less that you would pay to go to Europe or Thailand. And you can have those very experiences in the continent. But that's a whole nother episode.
Talk about it. I tell people that all the time. Like, if you want to travel Africa, there is a way to do it for every type of traveler. For the luxury traveler, for the beach snob, for the nature lover, for the resort person, for the city person who likes to, be at brunches and shopping. Like, there's a way to do it in a destination or several destinations, I should say, on the continent for every single type of traveler. So
right.
I'm glad you brought that up. That's another excuse that you should just throw out the window.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, you dropped the documentary, right? What kind of response did you get from the documentary being put out?
It was all love. It has been all love so far, man. I'm grateful for the opportunity to put it out there and just see myself, because obviously I had the experience, but just to see myself walking in that moment and people are connecting to it in a very real way. And, Togo and Benin aren't my first times in Africa. Before that, I had been to 7 other countries in Africa, but going through the lens of tracing my DNA and connecting to my ancestral ties is a whole different thing. And I think people really connect to that. And it's probably the way a lot of people want to connect to Africa, at least for the first time, which I think is a great idea, but it's been all love, and people are inspired and are sort of trying to figure out how to make it happen for themselves, and also putting the pieces together. And also when you see the visuals of it, it's a different thing to hear, oh, I know someone who went to this country, and it's a different thing to see a documentary and see someone walking down the streets and hanging out with people at local restaurants and bars and seeing the beaches and, me walking and seeing how beautiful it is. Cause it's a lot of imagery and concept that we don't get to see when we see Africa. Like, even for myself, my first time, 4 years ago when I was going to South Africa, my mindset, I knew Joburg was a big city and Cape Town was beaches and mountains. But in my head, I was so like, oh, I want to do something charitable. I want to give back, which is great. But my friend who was South African was like, bro, like, you're stressing yourself out. Go and have a vacation. Mm-hmm. Go and just live and experience it. And I did, without the idea, the context of, oh, this is Africa, so I have to do something else. And that was the best way to experience it. So I think that was the biggest takeaway, aside from people being inspired, was just putting out more visuals for people to see and normalize the experience of going to Africa. Like, right. People love just seeing me walking down the streets and hanging out and enjoying myself, because that's what it is. It's a great experience, and it comes with, depending on how you do it, it can come with some history that is a little bit painful, but overall, the experience is a vastly positive one. So I think people have been loving it. So I love that.
Yeah. And you actually did do something. The fact that you were there and you displayed that this is a space of leisure. This is a space of connection. These are the things that happen here. That does far more than people realize. Just the fact that you're there and you have found the joy and the pleasure in it, and you're sharing it with other people. A lot of times when I'm on the content, they're like, look, we just want you here so you can tell people how great of a time you had and like spread the word. Go back,
right?
And tell the family to come on. Like, it's that kind of moment. So, yeah, it's crazy. When I was watching your documentary, I was thankful, because I know that there wasn't a lot around those 2 locations where it came to things to look at. And then if it was from a different lens. It may have been, some girl with blonde hair going there and having a very different approach and level of appreciation for it that one of us would in that situation.
Absolutely. And I think, just diving into that point a little bit more is, I think, and again, this is why, I started Soul Society 101, why you guys started Black and Abroad, is that we aren't represented in these spaces. And when we see these videos sometimes of Africa, it is from a different perspective. And it is a totally different experience for a Black person to visit Africa than it is for a white person to visit Africa. Totally different experience. Beyond that, I want to tell everyone listening, I would say 90% of the flights that I've been on to go to the continent, whichever region, I've seen maybe like 4 or 5 other Black people on the flight. So there's been all this conversation and agenda and propaganda to make us think that Africa is not worth visiting. But guess who's visiting it on a regular basis?
Yo, deep,
white people
they be deep.
and Asian people.
Right.
White people and Asian people. And I'm not saying they shouldn't be there, but why aren't we going? You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah, I got the full scoop from a lot of the tourism boards over there where they were like, we don't even allocate that much money to North America. We go to Europe because they come down here in droves. Look, they used to it. That's how they was coming down there 400-500 years ago doing stuff they weren't supposed to. So they used to coming down there and living it up and been doing it for ages and keeping you in the dark about all the great, experiences that could be had down there. But it's crazy. And like you said, that's exactly why we do what we do. But, there's, I was reading through the comments on your stuff, and like you said, the majority of it was positive, but it's always like one fool on there, one fool, and luckily enough, I think the people came and jumped on him, but he was talking about I think he said something to the effect where I could tell him exactly where he was from, but you could tell it was like a troll. But
now let me tell you, no, this is worth discussing. So most of the comments were positive. There was one guy that was like, I could have told him where he was from, haha, like insinuating he needed to take a trip. He's from Africa, right? So someone else jumped in and was like, I don't understand. And he was like, well, he's from Africa, clearly. And they were like, well, you didn't know which country. They're actually 54. And, he was he was displaying his own ignorance in the commentary. And then he went as far, it didn't take long at all for him to go in and try to make digs and racial comments and, oh, your name is ethnic, as if he didn't have his own ethnic name from a different part of the world. But it was it was crazy. But, he ended it with saying America. And I'm going to just leave it at that. So we know exactly who he was at the end of the day. He was a MAGA hat wearing, just ignorant person. But, I'm not even mad at it. And let me tell you why. The conversation is going to be had. You know what I'm saying? And I just want to be a part of the conversation because there are anti-Black people, there are anti-Africa people, and I am pro both of those things. So I'm happy to be the face of it in some capacity.
I hear that. Well, Rondel, thank you so much for coming through and sharing your experience. Like I said, I am now hyped because I got my kit, and fear not, cousin Pookie and them. I am opting out of sharing my results with the rest of the database, so you ain't got to worry about being hemmed up or somebody rolling up on your door with a warrant for something you did in 92. It's not going to happen. All right. But yeah, I'm hyped for that and curious to see where that leads me to and what kind of heritage journey I can have. But before I let you go, tell the people what you got coming next, what you got going on.
Yes, so I'm continuing my heritage journey to Ghana, Ivory Coast, and Congo, and Cameroon throughout the year. So you can keep up with me on Instagram. My personal Instagram is King Ron the Don, and my travel production company, Soul Society 101, is SOUL Society on Instagram. So you can follow both of those pages to keep up with the journey. I have a lot more travels outside of my Heritage Journey series as well. Like you, I'm going to be in Africa a lot this year. So hopefully see you out there, and hopefully you guys keep up, those of you listening.
Yes. And don't forget, he also has a very dope podcast, as well. So you should definitely check it out.
Soul Society 101, the podcast. Check that out. And Kent was on there before too.
Yes, sir. Definitely check out that episode. I think it's one of the best biased, yes. But I was on there. Definitely check it out. It's very dope. And of course, I want to thank you guys for listening and hanging with me. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Kent W. Johnson. You can find the podcast on those same places as well at Ungentrified Pod. And of course, you can listen to the other episodes wherever your ears may prefer podcasts and on the website, ungentrifiedpodcast.com. If you love me, and you know you do, and you want to keep Black stories in people's ears, hey, it's Black History Month. That's exactly what we should be doing, sharing these Black stories. Tell a friend about the podcast. Take it a step further if you really love me, and go on to Apple Podcasts and leave a review, not just a star. Hit some taps on the keyboard or on your smartphone and leave a written review as well. It helps immensely. Rondel, again, thank you for coming through and sharing with us, for spitting in the tube and going across the world and coming back and sharing with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and I'll check you guys next time. Peace.